Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, whenever you guys will see this. But we're back. For those of you that have never seen it, I'm Omar, and with me is Jackson, my good friend. Jackson, you have any words to say from this kind of chaotic bowl season we've just had?
Yeah, wow, the ACC sucked. Ohio State actually is the real deal, and hats off to Oklahoma. Man.
Yeah, no, I'd have to say. I mean, there's a lot in the group of five. My chosen expertise, as in the Conference USA, did not have a great bowl season, winless. I think 0-6. It was a big bowl season for them. They had many bowls. The Americans pretty rough as well. I think they went 1-5. Their only win coming with Memphis against FAU at a Conference USA. And otherwise, it was just an interesting bowl season. San Jose State, the darlings of the country, got blown out in the Arizona Bowl, and
Yeah, I was about to say I would like to forget that was rough.
it was very rough. I was embarrassed, but congratulations to Ball State Cardinals for probably the biggest bowl win in their history. It's a program on the rise under Mike New. But that's not what we came to talk to you about. We came to talk to you about the Heisman Trophy, both the results that already came out and the ceremony that's going to happen tomorrow night. And so our finalists that we have here, well, first, let's go after the voting. I know, Jackson, you have the top 10 or the 10 through 5, if you will. And can you just mention those off really quick and we can discuss those?
Right. So if you're not already familiar with how it works, basically everyone has voted. So there's nothing that's been decided since I think Christmas Eve up until now. We already know the results, or somebody already knows the results, probably ESPN graphics department. But we do know the 5th through 10th. So I'll go ahead and start off with 5th, Najee Harris, well-deserved running back out of Alabama. If it had continued, it wouldn't have hurt himself with the Rose Bowl, with how well he did there. Brees Hall, running back from Iowa State, probably Iowa State's first consensus All-American in their history. Justin Fields, maybe going a little bit off the name there from last year's performance, but fair enough. He did have a good year, going to go high in the first round probably. Zach Wilson, quarterback out of BYU. If you're familiar, if you follow kind of close, or not very closely, but casually, like Power 5 football, maybe you've heard the name Zach Wilson, you don't know much about him. Just an electric player, drawing a lot of comparisons to Patrick Mahomes in the NFL world. Just a great guy, extends the play. He had a phenomenal year over there with that only loss to Coastal Carolina. And finally, Ian Book, quarterback out of Notre Dame, who I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with, and Kyle Pitts, who had a phenomenal year at tight end for Florida.
Yeah, and so I mostly don't have many misgivings with the rankings. If it were up to me, I think you should switch Wilson with Fields because Wilson had a much bigger body of work, and the opponents weren't as elite. He had a couple bowl teams. I mean, he had UTSA. He played against Houston, of course, Coastal Carolina. Maybe if he beats Coastal Carolina, leads them on that game-winning drive, he gets higher in the rankings. I like Pitts at 10. It's great to see Pitts or a tight end even in the rankings. They're first since Ken McAfee in 1977, who came in third with a slash line of 54 catches, 797 yards, and 6 touchdowns. I like Brees Hall where he's at. Thought he had a great year. Would love to see him be a finalist for Iowa State because that's something that the program hasn't really had. I don't think they've had a guy. Oh, actually, the last guy that got votes for Iowa State was Troy Davis, great back in the mid-90s, who had over 2,000 yards, I think in 96. Forgot to do research there on that one. Who else in there? And I mean, I don't really have many misgivings. I mean, Ian Book, that's a bit of a brand name one. I respect the heck out of Ian Book. Great player. I just don't think the stats were there. And he had a couple of hiccups. Notre Dame had a couple of hiccups, like in game 1 against Duke, when they kind of slipped up against a Duke team that would go 2-9. Louisville, that team went 4-7. Notre Dame only beat them 12-7. So I have some misgivings there. And I mean, if you're going to give Book, so I think my revised 10 through 5 would be this. It would be, I'd like Pitts actually I'll go 10. I think 10, I'd either go Jarrett Patterson or Malik Willis out of Liberty, especially after Malik Willis just absolutely went off in the Cure Bowl. And he was just as electric, I think, as Zach Wilson. So I'd go Malik Willis or Jarrett Patterson. I can't decide who I'd put where. So I'd put him at 10. 9, Kyle Pitts for sure. I'd slide down Justin Fields at 8 because of the small body of work, if we're being honest. And then after that, I'd go Zach Wilson, Brees Hall, and then Najee Harris. So, I mean, that's where I'm at. What about you, Jackson?
For me, I agree with 5 and 6 from the actual Heisman results totally. I think Harris probably had a better year than Hall, especially as a pass catcher. I'd probably put him at 5 and Brees Hall keep at 6. I would put Zach Wilson at 7. I think he had a phenomenal year at BYU. I think he really made a name for himself and deservedly so. After that, I know I'm a little bit biased here. Kyle Pitts had a once in a generation for a tight end season, and the first Biletnikoff finalist as a tight end. He just had a great year. After that, I would put Ian Book. I would keep him at 9, I guess, and then honestly, Justin Fields' two toughest regular season games were Northwestern and Indiana. He had, I think, if I remember right, a combined 5 interceptions between those. I would knock him off the list. I would put Jared Patterson in there at 10 because he also had kind of a smaller body of work. He didn't really go off until a couple of games in. But man, he deservedly, I think, should have been on that list, much more so than Justin Fields, in my opinion, for this year.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of things in college football, the sort of disconnection of hypocrisy goes both ways. Where I mean, a player's a small body of work, and they get dinged for it, but that didn't happen with Justin Fields, and it sort of happened with Jarrett Patterson, even though he had a really generational game. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say generational because he had Melvin Gordon rush for 400, Samaje Perine rush for 400 in the span of 2 weeks in 2014, but still a 400-yard rusher. There's only been 4 guys, I think, in a FBS that have ever ran for 400 yards in a game, and especially against a good Kent State team that can put up points on the board. I think that's deserving. That's deserving, really, to say the least. But I think the Heisman mostly got it right. We'll see come the ceremony tomorrow if most of America thinks they got it right. So let's hop into these finalists and just the history and other stats between them. Jackson, you can start off with whoever.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start off with the current betting favorite, and I think probably the favorite for both of us to win the Heisman, DeVonta Smith. He had 105 receptions for 1,600 plus yards, 20 touchdowns, and a 15 and a half. Everyone knows you're going to throw the ball to DeVonta Smith, and he still had a 15-yard average catching the ball. So just an insane year. Really, the only argument I think you could make against him is that he's a slam dunk Biletnikoff, but is he really like the best player in all of college football? I'll give you a little context in the Biletnikoff. So the last time that a Biletnikoff Award winner had this many receptions was 2014. So it's been a while. I think 2010 was the year before, or the year before that this had happened. And then only twice since 2010 has he had Biletnikoff Award winner has had this many touchdowns. So, and remember, this is in a shortened season. So we're going off of an even smaller body of work, and he's beating out guys that have won, for the past decade that have had more games to do this and against lesser opponents. So he really has just taken this to a next level. And I think he's very deserving. I would not be surprised, and I'd be thrilled for Smith if he did win. And is there anything more 2020 than a non-quarterback or running back winning the Heisman? It's just a fitting end to what was a strange but great college football season.
Yeah, I totally agree. He'd be the first receiver since Desmond Howard back in '91 to win it. And Howard had really, I think, for that time, and even now, if you will, a really generational year as he had 62 catches, seems a bit low, 985 yards, but 19 touchdowns for a Michigan team. I think Bo Schembechler had just retired, but a great Michigan team that I think went to the Rose Bowl, but got slammed by Washington. But 19 touchdowns receiving, that's great even today. And I think that's actually more than DeVonta Smith has this year, if I'm not mistaken, before the Rose Bowl. And then some recent, or I'm just going to go to the line of some notable receivers who have finished high. In 2003, you had Larry Fitzgerald, who I think got robbed against Jason White, as Jason White played for Oklahoma, a team that would win or went to the national title game. Yeah, they went to the national title game. So it's sort of like the quarterback of the best team that year. Fitzgerald had 92 catches for 1,672 yards and 22 touchdowns. I don't know how he didn't win that. The only thing that I can see is him being on the second best Big East team in the country, because the Big East, as we know, is currently the American, wasn't the best conference, especially after Miami left. After that, another notable one is Amari Cooper, back in 2014, who had 124 catches, 1,727 yards, and 16 touchdowns, coming in third. again, I think that's a generational year, but Marcus Mariota, again, best quarterback on what seemed to be the best team there that year. Uh, again, D.D. Westbrook, a more recent one in 2016, came in fourth, had 80 catches, so he touched the ball a bit less, but 17 touchdowns and 1,524 yards for, interestingly enough, an Oklahoma team that wasn't in the national title race after 2 early season losses to Houston and Ohio State. So, I mean, that's an interesting thing there that Westbrook went fourth there. And then historically, another receiver to win it, Tim Brown, back in '87, who didn't do so much receiving, only had about 34 or so catches, but had 1,900 all-purpose yards and returned 3 kicks for touchdowns, and just did it all for Notre Dame team. And people love Notre Dame, as we saw with Ian Book in the voting this year. And then a couple more receivers going back further, or not really further. I'm kind of out of order here, but it's just how I found these notes. But David Palmer, another receiver for Alabama, kind of do-it-all guy like Tim Brown back in '93. Finished fourth, I think. Didn't write down the finish. Thought I could remember it. But he was in the voting there. And even way back in history, another guy that I think got robbed, Tulsa in 1965, Howard Twilley, who had 134 catches, 1,779 yards in 10 games. But he did not win the Heisman. He lost to Mike Garrett, a running back at a USC. It seems so long ago that the Heisman was a running back award, especially a USC running back award. And then Jack Snow back in '64 with Notre Dame's triumphant return, where they rose to the polls in Ara Parsegan's first year. Jack Snow had 60 catches for 1,114 yards and 9 touchdowns for the Fighting Irish. So there's a little bit of history there for the receivers. Kind of uncharted territory, you see.
Yeah, I mean, if there was ever a year for a receiver to have a generational year and win the Heisman, it would be this year, just because everything's been so unusual. And we'll get into it. The statistically best quarterback by far did not finish well, so that certainly helped Smith case for sure.
Yeah, and so if you will, Jackson, can we go to the next candidate, and we'll go over our thoughts on him? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and go with we'll skip over Mac Jones real quick, cover Kyle Trask. He had 4,125 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions before that horrendous Cotton Bowl performance. So I think Kyle Trask's biggest knock was the regular season losses for Florida, right? Because they had that bad one to Texas A&M. They should have won if Malik Davis just holds on to the ball. They had that really bad LSU loss that just looked sloppy, even though Kyle Trask didn't really have much to do with that. But, of course, he's the leader of the team. The team does bad. He gets knocked. There have been Heisman winners with 3 regular season losses. Most recent, Lamar Jackson. Before that, RG3. Tim Tebow, a lot of people think are just kind of forget that, Tim Tebow won 2006 and 2008, the national championships. That middle year, 2007, when they lost in the Outback Bowl to Michigan, if I remember right, was when he won the Heisman. He had 3 regular season losses. That Ricky Williams, Tim Brown, Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen, 4 others before that, before the 80s, all had regular season losses. So there isn't that much of a history with Heisman winners getting knocked because of their team's losses, but it seems to be the stereotype this year. Now remember, before the Cotton Bowl, all of these were voted. We've talked about that before. So I think he would definitely not win it if we had seen that 3 interception Oklahoma performance before. But there is a chance with that, a little bit with the history of Florida quarterbacks that have won or end up in the finalists. The oldest, Steve Spurrier, this was just really funny looking at these stats. 2,012 yards, 16 touchdowns, 8 interceptions in 10 games. Doesn't sound great. He had a game-winning kick in a huge game versus Auburn. That was kind of his Heisman moment. Wasn't even throwing the ball. Danny Werfel, over 3,600 yards, 39 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, 1 regular season loss versus Florida State in that regular season finale. Then in 2001, Florida had a finalist, Rex Grossman, 3,896 yards, 34 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. He lost to Eric Couch, who had 19 passing touchdowns and 18 rushing touchdowns. A lot of people in the Florida fan base think Grossman got ripped off in 2001. The common thought. Tim Tebow, Of course, in 2007, over 3,200 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. Had a great year. Just couldn't get it done in the bowl game or go to the BCS.
Yeah, so I mean, as you see, like a rich history of Florida quarterbacks here, but I mean, I do agree, Jackson. The regular season losses were the knock, especially. I think the thing with Tebow is like people had never seen his, or with Lamar Jackson, we'll start off with people had never seen a season as like transcendent as that, as electrifying, especially like you look at his his Heisman moments. He had multiple you can consider. The noon game against Florida State, where Florida State got destroyed 63-20 by that Louisville team. You have the game-winning drive against Virginia, going toe-to-toe with Deshaun Watson. I mean, he had tons of Heisman moments. Same with Tim Tebow. With Kyle Trask, you kind of like don't really have like as much as I guess a Heisman moment as you have like consistency. I think like his Heisman moment, I think would be probably the Georgia game, just that performance. But otherwise, like the losses against LSU hurt for sure. I mean, if Florida makes that kick, maybe we have some revisionist history here. But I think Trask falls short. And I think he takes second in my eyes because I'll take him over Mac Jones for sure, which I guess is a good segue into Mac Jones, Jackson. So let's hear our thoughts about Mac Jones.
Yeah, he had over 3,700 yards, 3,739, 32 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. So less interceptions, about 11 less touchdowns. And my impression of Mac Jones is that, this has been a knock on Tua the past couple games for the Miami Dolphins. Ryan Fitzpatrick told him on the sideline, there's a difference between Alabama Open and NFL Open. Mac Jones has seen a whole nother level of Alabama Open. Like he's got Najee Harris, DeVonta Smith. Yeah, I don't even want to know if he had Waddle this year. He is just he has had a great year, but he's been everyone's been open. Like he hasn't had to fit it in that many tight windows. And yeah, he's had the occasional like just dime putting in perfectly. But a lot of these 32 touchdowns are from yak or from just guys being wide open. And you could make the same argument for Kyle Trask. I think Florida's thrown to like 15 different receivers this year. So there's a little bit more depth, but he's passed the ball a little bit more around than Mac Jones. But that's my knock on why I'd be kind of bothered if Mac Jones won, because his receivers have done a lot of work for him. You put him with kind of an average receiving group, I don't know that he has this year, but I don't think he has the kind of year he has.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, I think for me, this is a case where on a great team, you have a quarterback who is helped by great skill guys. And that's not a knock on Mac Jones, but when you have skill guys that have had such great years like Najee Harris running for over 20 touchdowns and DeVonta Smith having the year that he had. And I remember you sent me a tweet with about Mac Jones's Heisman moment being a wide open shallow route across the middle against LSU. And I think that kind of sums up the situation, like you said, with Alabama Open and NFL Open, because, I mean, the skill guys are just so amazing there. And compared to, I guess, a guy like Trask or, Trevor Lawrence, for that matter, who all he has is like a ETN. I mean, not much in the receiving corps, even though there's good receivers. It's nothing like, no nationally prominent receivers, no great NFL talent, or no, there probably are great NFL talents, but no, I guess, superstar NFL talents like slam dunks. But a little bit of history for Alabama quarterbacks in the Heisman race. It's only been like a more recent phenomenon, as you had Tua come in second in 2018, 2019, my mistake. Actually, 2018. Yeah, sorry. Jeez. And then in 2013, you had A.J. McCarron come in second, but in the past was kind of barren as Bear Bryant's system, even though that he had great teams. It wasn't really like conducive to quarterbacks. You had Pat Trammell come fifth in 1961, who instead of going to the NFL, went to medical school, but tragically died of testicular cancer, is something I found out. A little bit of a somber note. But 1983, you had Walter Lewis. Interestingly enough, the first year that Bear Bryant was gone, and Walter Lewis had 1,991 passing yards, 338 rushing yards, 14 passing touchdowns, 15 picks, interestingly enough, and 5 rushing touchdowns. So people love dual threat quarterbacks at that time. They're like shooting stars back in the day. So a guy like Walter Lewis, a stat line like that allowed him to come in 9th in 83. And then you got Jay Barker, who was the last quarterback for Alabama to get Heisman votes until McCarron in 2013. And in that year, Barker really had not so great stats. He had 1,996 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 5 picks on a 12-1 Alabama team that won the Citrus Bowl. So it was more like that was the previous year they won the national championship, I believe, against Miami in the Sugar Bowl. Actually, no, they went to the Gator Bowl in 1993, so it was 92. So Barker had that credibility from the 1992 championship season, I believe, and he just had a nice year. But it's amazing if you told us today that a quarterback with 14 touchdowns would be coming fifth in the Heisman, we'd look at you strange. So there's a little bit of history there, but not much. Just kind of shows about, I guess, like the culture of Alabama with position players. Not really been a quarterback-driven program like, say, Florida, as you've mentioned, Jackson.
Right. I mean, absolutely. I think, Mac Jones has had a statistically best career for an Alabama quarterback. I think probably beating Tua out as far as this point in the season or through this many games, especially if you take Tua's only SEC opponents. But I just don't see it. Like, it's just, like we talked about. These guys have been wide open. DeVonta Smith, Najee Harris, all of them have helped them out. I don't think he's the best player. If Mac Jones does somehow win, and I neither of us think he will, if he somehow does, I wouldn't be shocked if the storyline was just the feel-good story of, early on in his time in Alabama, he did have, I think, 2 DUIs, really gotten his life together, done and good for him. That's awesome. But if he does somehow win, that's a great feel-good story of going from struggling with all of that to what he is now. So that may be the storyline, but I think neither of us see that even.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I didn't think about the feel-good story thing for sure. But again, like as we've seen, like Jason White in 03, the Heisman's typically been best quarterback, or lately at least, best quarterback on the best team. But again, we haven't in those years we haven't really had transcendent talents or once in a generation seasons like DeVonta Smith. So which brings us to our last Heisman candidate, Trevor Lawrence. I guess we'll change it up a bit and go with a bit of history. And they've had some great quarterbacks. For those of you that may be older and watching or listening to this, Woodrow Dantzler, who was a 2000, 1000 guy at quarterback, never got Heisman votes. Clipboard Jesus for Charlie Whitehurst for our NFL fans. He was a solid quarterback, but not really anything Heisman worthy. Deshaun Watson was the first in really recent memory to get Heisman votes at quarterback for Clemson, as he went third in 2015 and second in 2016. And people still think Deshaun Watson got screwed both years. And I mean, the way that man carried the team, I mean, not really carried, but just did so well, with great stats. I mean, you can say that. And then also in 1978, I just looked up Steve Fuller, who went sixth in 1978 as a quarterback for Clemson. And then Steve Fuller, notably Deshaun Watson wore his number 4 for like the last few years. I'm not sure if you saw the patch that said Fuller on his Clemson jersey, a little uniform tidbit. So kind of a barren quarterback history for Clemson, as they are a bit of a late blooming blue chip program, or blue blood, I mean. So Jackson, let's hear your thoughts on Trevor Lawrence's case. It's a bit strange because he missed 2 games, I think.
Right. I remember we did a podcast, I think about a month and a half ago, and I said that if Trevor Lawrence somehow wins the Heisman, it's going to be a first ever Heisman moment where he didn't even play. I think you would have to go back to that Notre Dame game where he was out. It was a very close game on the road to Notre Dame. Everyone stormed the field, all that. And then Trevor Lawrence goes in the ACC championship and just it embarrasses Notre Dame in that ACC championship game. And if he wins, I think that he's the least likely out of all of these to win, just because he hasn't had. If he does win, it's going to be because of that and because of the name Trevor Lawrence, which we've known since that national title game in 2018. But man, like the difference for Clemson between that first game against Notre Dame and then that second one where they just obliterate them, that's really the only difference. And man, like if he does end up winning this somehow, that'll probably be why.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree that the second ACC championship was his Heisman moment. And I mean, I think that brings to a further point where a guy like Trevor Lawrence can have a great year with not really many quote-unquote Heisman moments. I think that's a great point towards the lack of parity in the ACC. And it's not just a recent phenomenon. This sort of thing existed when Florida State was making their initial run in the ACC when they only lost, I think, 5 conference games in the 90s before their sort of down. I mean, not even downfall, before they started actually like coming down to earth, really. So I mean, that's like a traditional phenomenon in the ACC where it's just not much parity. It's more of a basketball conference for sure, and I don't think people realize that. But that's a discussion for another time. But again, I think people are saying that Trevor Lawrence should win it as a lifetime achievement award. Now, I mean, not in a year when there's like other deserving guys would I say that. I think another guy, oddly enough, that had the lifetime achievement award argument was Keenan Reynolds for Navy, who finished 5th, who who I think still has all-time touchdowns record for I mean, just rushing and receiving combined. Interestingly, a quarterback. I mean, they said that he should be higher in the Heisman because as sort of a lifetime achievement award, but also luckily for that year, Navy had a strong year, almost made New Year's Six. And Keenan Reynolds had some big games, especially against Memphis. Or I mean, I think they were ranked 7th in or not even 7th. Sorry, they were ranked top 15 in the playoff rankings when Navy beat them. But I'm just not one for the lifetime achievement award sort of argument for the Heisman. Maybe in a year that's barren, but not in a year like this.
Right. No, I totally agree. There are Kyle Trask and DeVonta Smith who have both had Heisman level seasons, at least for most of the year. You shouldn't give it to someone for lifetime achievement just because there's not a clear cut like guy that's well above the rest, like there was with Joe Burrow last year. It's not fair to any other candidates. So yeah, I mean, one question I do want to pose to you though. The Heisman is for the best player in college football. Who do you think is the most valuable player to their team? Because that's 2 different questions.
I think we're talking most valuable player. You have to look at like schemes, and in terms of like value, they come from like sort of like one-dimensional schemes, I think. And like if you look at the top 10, like one by one, I mean, like you have guys that have had like good supporting casts, like Brees Hall, Brock Purdy, Charlie Kohler, pro-ready tight end for Iowa State, a great defense at Iowa State as well. Najee Harris, of course, is DeVonta Smith, and Mac Jones. Mac Jones is DeVonta Smith and Najee Harris. I mean, if you look at it, I think valuable-wise, I think Trevor Lawrence, because even though Clemson was great against Boston College when he was, or not great against Notre Dame, or I mean, not bad against Notre Dame. He still put up 40 points with DJ Uiagalelei. But like you just saw like sort of the drop off in play. I don't think they would have fell behind against Boston College as bad as they did with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. And I think just going down the rankings as well. I think as well, I'm going to go with someone kind of obscure. I'm going to go with Malik Willis because of all the things he did for that team. I'd have to say Malik Willis was very valuable in the type of stuff they did and how electric he made that offense for Liberty. You can just see it in the Cure Bowl. So, I mean, those are like my 2 guys, Lawrence and Willis.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say Lawrence. I think he's probably the top guy. I think you could even put Zach Wilson in there, honestly, just with the year he's had. And then Brees Hall, I think, has to be at worst in the top 3. How valuable he's been to Iowa State and setting up that play action pass and all that for Brock Purdy. I think he would be up there too for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question, like, thinking about it, because, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, like, the whole scope of college football. I think even maybe a guy like Jarrett Patterson, but that argument's kind of down a bit because, I mean, they beat Marshall. They beat a solid Marshall team in the Camellia Bowl with a solid back and Kevin Marks Jr. at 138 yards and also was averaging 100 yards per game himself for Buffalo. So, I mean, I don't think you can even go Jarrett Patterson.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for just the regular season, Jared Patterson, and if you take that hindsight out of them beating Marshall, I think you can make that argument. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion. It is 2 very different questions. I think people confuse best and most valuable, and that you see that confusion a lot in the NFL MVP award. I feel like it goes to the best player when a lot of times, if it was MVP, literally, Derrick Henry would win it, I think, in a landslide. But 2 different questions, and I'd love to see that discussion more for college too. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that concludes what we have to say, really. I mean, we went through each finalist, each vote getter, some extra as well. And we'll just have to see what happens tomorrow night. I mean, I'm excited for sure. it'll be different. It's kind of funny not seeing the Heisman presentation right after the Army Navy game, but I mean, this year's been a different year.
Yeah, it's been a very different year, and I'm excited to see who wins. Hopefully, it's not literally through Zoom. Hopefully, ESPN sent like 4 cameras out just so we can see and hear everyone a little bit better. So it's going to be different than any other year, but maybe in more ways than one if a wide receiver gets the Heisman.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I'm excited, and until next time, we have a couple of episodes lined up, picking all bowl teams draft style, and explaining that might take a while too. So we'll sort that one out. And also, a little bit down the road, we'll talk some FCS guys. And you guys might think we're crazy, but I think some FCS guys in this crazy year had an argument to get some Heisman votes, not to win it, to get some Heisman votes. But until next time, I'm Omar, and Jax, you have any final words? All right. So next time, peace, love, and soul, everyone.